Hello and welcome to another episode of Stardust. Today, Dino Atanasio and I will have a chat with Oliver Acker, animation director and producer. Stay tuned. Welcome to Stardust. Hello everyone, thank you for sticking around. It's Robbie here. Today, Dino Atanasio and I have a super special guest. Please join us in welcoming animation director, producer, coach, trainer, instructor, and mentor in animation. Among his works are the Capcom's game Streetfighter 4, Riverdance, Disney's Tarzan, Hercules, and Star Wars Clone Wars. With you, Mr. Oliver Acker.
Nice to meet you. It's a pleasure.
Ollie, thanks for coming. Nice to meet you too. It's awesome to have you here.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you for having me.
How are you guys doing?
Yeah, we're doing great. It's funny because Ollie and I were just saying, I think we go back as work colleagues and friends. What was it, 21 years? 21, yeah, almost 22. Wow, yeah. We first worked together in Hamburg, Germany, on a really weird feature. Actually, it was an animated feature. Yeah, Otifants. Yeah, it was basically elephants. Ollie was at the time sort of the head character designer on the film. Yeah, there was more than 200 characters or something. They all looked the same. Wow, yeah, 200 characters. Yeah.
So where did you actually start in animation, Ollie?
I started in the 80s actually, and there was before internet. So it was not. I suddenly had the idea I want to become an animator, and it's not like you can Google online how to become an animator. So it was really difficult times of how to find out more about it. And then I saw an article about Andreas Deja, who is a German animator at Disney, who was really an established animator at the time, who was the main creator of the animation for Black Cauldron. And I was like, wow, there's a German working in Hollywood at Disney. So I thought like, wow, I really want to do that. And but I just didn't know how. So I called actually in Germany, I called TV channels and newspapers and asked for addresses and for contacts. And that's how I got the addresses, for example, for the Disney studios or Don Bluth studios. And I wrote actual letters and not like emails. We didn't have emails then. I wrote letters that I'm a big fan and I really want to be an animator, how to do that. And this way, interestingly, I got to know some really amazing artists, among Andreas Deja, who called me one day after he received my letter. And as well, I got a reply from people like Ollie Johnson and Don Bluth himself, writing letters to me and giving me advice what to do, and giving me a list of books that I should read. And that the most important thing I learned first is like, I needed to understand that I have to learn to draw the real thing. Like human anatomy, animals. It came a bit as a surprise to me at first, but they make total sense because I was always more of a cartoon artist. So it was like, oh my God, how can I do this? And then I actually started taking live drawing classes, went to the zoo all the time, do sketches, sketch people around me all the time, have sketchbooks. And this is how it all started. And it was a traditional animation time. It wasn't any computer animation, right? So that's interesting. So when you got the reply letter from Don Bluth, had he left the Disney studios at that time, or was he already? Yeah, he had his own studio. Wow, yeah, of course, yeah. And he recommended me the Preston Blair books. Like then. Yeah. Well, that's funny, isn't it? It's like the back to basics. The advice Ollie was given is the best advice. It's like they say you have, 1,000,001 bad drawings in your system that you've got to get out before you start to get to those golden drawings, those good drawings. But learning from the real before you can caricature is always the best way forward. So that was good sound advice. And that's incredible that you not only got a reply from Ollie Johnson, but you became pen pals. You became friends via the old-fashioned letter writing, which is incredible. Ollie Johnson was one of the 9 old men of animation, veteran animators at the Disney studios, basically the big stars of the Disney studio at the time. Yeah, so, I mean, how many years did that span, that right? Well, it was basically in the 80s, and I didn't know how to study this because there weren't any courses. There was only graphic design or really abstract art at that time in Germany. So I really took my sketchbook and went out and sketched all the time while I was actually making a living on some smaller jobs. Until one fine day, Andreas Deja invited me over to the Disney studios to take an internship there during the times of Aladdin. And I was like, wow, because I couldn't believe this, right? So I spent my first time in an animation studio, really, in Disney in Los Angeles at the time when they did finish up. They finished up Beauty and the Beast at the time, and they were starting on Aladdin. And this is where Andreas gave me some animation assignments that I could do, and I could basically access the people at the studio and ask them for feedback on my animation work, which was awesome. Everybody was very helpful and supportive.
You mentioned a few projects just now, and obviously I mentioned a few when I introduced, but in a moment, we're going to talk about Star Wars and your work with Cartoon Network as well. But could you tell us some of the other works that you've done that you're really proud of, that were really cool projects?
Well, I must say I'm most proud of, to be honest, to have worked on Hercules and Tarzan. I mean, I'm an old school guy. I love the 2D animation. I do love it. And this was a very different way of working, collaborating together with artists, and having people like Glenn Keane, who I assisted the animation work for. It's just amazing to have these talents around you. And also Disney gave us a 6-month ramp-up training on Tarzan, on human anatomy, on Tai Chi classes, and these kind of things that we understand and learn movement. So this was, to be honest, the best time. And I was most proud of that time. And my dream came true. I mean, I worked very hard for 8 years to reach my dream, and there I was.
Well deserved.
Thank you. And I couldn't believe it, actually.
And this was in Paris. This was when Disney had a base in Paris, France. And so Glenn Keane had made the move, I think, with his family over to Paris to head up, I guess, the animation or lead the character
Yes.
of Tarzan at the Disney Brizzi Brothers studio in Paris. And incidentally, I worked with the Brizzi brothers before they formed the Disney studio in Paris on one of the Asterix films. So it shows it's a very small world. And so I think the period that Ollie is speaking about on Hercules and on Tarzan, it's one of the golden periods of animation, and I think it was a wonderful opportunity for Ollie to kind of work at that setup, because there was a real focus on pushing the standard and craftsmanship of animation.
Absolutely. I think Glenn actually went there to do a short film, Rapunzel, at that time. That's why he wanted to go to Paris, because he loved the European influence and the artists. And Disney kind of convinced him to jump on board to the studio to then lead the main character Tarzan on the film. And I think that made it very attractive for him, and for everybody else was very excited and happy to have the chance to work with Glenn Keane on site. That was really great. So yeah, I would say that was the most amazing and exciting times, because at the same time, the DreamWorks studio opened up to work on Prince of Egypt. And you had all these interesting calls from studios that try to sack people from other studios, trying to hire.
Yeah, they were. I think there was a real frenzy for talent. Obviously, I think there were so many projects happening, and it was exciting times with DreamWorks forming, which was formerly Ambling Animation in London, when they had the studio there, with Spielberg sort of heading that up. And then once Katzenberg had set up DreamWorks Animation in Los Angeles, it was a pull for talent. And then at the same time, Warner Brothers were setting up, I think, Space Jam. So there was so much happening.
Right.
And there was only so much 2D animators, so much in the way of talent available. So everyone was fighting for the same.
Yeah, and the studios got very nervous. I remember they don't pick up the phone and all of this kind of thing. It was really interesting, because I think Katzenberg will call people, we pay you twice as much as in the studio you're working now. And
I think this is when the rates just shot up. And I think it's one of the reasons why I think a Space Jam, for example, Warner Brothers had a, quite a big budget, and it was hard to compete.
Yeah.
And at the time, before my own studio at Stardust, before we jumped onto our segment of Space Jam. We were finishing off MGM, All Dogs Go to Heaven 2. And so I still had crew members there, and there were calls coming in to try and poach my guys, and so it was quite a trying, difficult time, but also exciting, I have to say.
And we didn't know at that time what DreamWorks was up to. We kind of just rumors, and we wanted to be the better film. So they really made sure that Tarzan needs to be a really great film. So they put it back into story development for another 6 months, which is when we got the training, just to be able to compete with the level that they expected it might come out of the DreamWorks studios, their first film.
Yeah.
So it was really exciting times. About 10 years later, so Dino and I got to work together again. And I think those were really exciting times, getting back together with Dino and working on modern productions, CG productions, and things like I remember well is for me, Kiss Me First, we did some cool animatics there. That was very, I was learning new skill set with Dino particularly because Dino has also a great understanding of live action and cinematography. Well, I came a lot more from the cartoony side, so I could really learn from Dino on those projects, which was great, and I'm quite proud of those actually.
This was Kiss Me First, the Netflix / Channel 4 series, which was basically cinematics combined with live action. It's all based around a game. But yeah, so we put together a little storyboard team there. There was 3 of us. There was Joe, Ollie, and myself. I was heading up story on that, but it was actually an interesting project, and it was 6 10-minute chunks of animation. So and within that we had to design the world, create the characters and the feel of these these game animatic sort of storyline and cinematography. But it was fun, and it was again a great opportunity to jam with Ollie again.
Again, from our collaboration, I moved more into directing and managing actually creative teams, which I loved. I slowly transitioned more into that area, and also together with my teaching background that we can talk about as well. And that was a great combination because we could head to studios and set up their entire departments. When studios were in need, they basically engaged us on some productions where they made the shift from visual effects into feature animation, and they needed someone to head the story department. So they brought Dino, and with Dino, I came on board to set up entire story department for a gig in Poland, for example, which was great.
Yeah.
So talking about more on teaching and mentoring, can you tell us more about the project you did with Lucasfilm? As you know, I'm a huge fan of Star Wars, and I heard you had a huge project with them on Clone Wars.
Yes, and that was in Singapore. I actually went to Singapore to take up some teaching. I wanted to do a workshop in Singapore, but then school basically said, no, you have to stay here and teach our students. And suddenly I saw myself being a full-time teacher, which was great for a while. I really enjoyed it. But I knew I will always want to go back into production. And then the Lucasfilm studio set up in Singapore, called at that time Lucasfilm Animation Studio, LAS. And they because it basically was heavily subsidized by the government and encouraged by the government for the studio to set up there. So now it was a task of the studio, Lucasfilm, to set up shop there. And I've been brought on board basically due to my teaching experience in the region, because of my network with local artists. My job was to really identify the talent there, who's the right talent to come on board, and train them up to be able to produce actually the Clone Wars show in-house. And I had help. Of course, I had access to the entire ILM library as well as teachers and so on. So I've been brought over to San Francisco for a while to learn the flow of the production flow, how the supervising animators work there, so that I can apply what I have learned in the studio in Singapore. And so ended up collaborating with Sean Kelly, who was running up the Animation Mentor at that time. And we basically developed the animation program together for the animators based on the timeline and the curriculum that I develop for the studio so that we can ramp up the talent. And so we hired the talents. We gave them strong training on animation, as I said, but also on drawing, things like drawing, like live drawing, all these things that I have learned from people like Len Keane and Andreas Deja and from Ollie Johnson. I tried to pass it on to the young generation of animators that were all CG animators. Some of them suffered quite a bit, to be honest, with the drawing part, and they quite didn't get it. Why do we need to learn to draw? I don't get this. And but I think many of them later on came into terms with it and understood and why.
The value,
the value of it. Some of them never really got the hang of it and stayed more technical animators. But it was actually great because I could create the training program at Lucasfilm that I always wanted myself. Where it was like, because I didn't have that in Germany back then, what would be my training program like? And I was also a big Star Wars fan, so I could bring all these elements together. And it was amazing then to work with people like Dave Filoni came over to have a look, and we could discuss things and how to approach the training. And like I said, I had access to the entire talent base of trainers and material from ILM, and could really dig deep into all of what they had to offer. It was even the old studio at that time, the Kerner studio, before it was actually Presidio. So I could really get to see the old studio where they did all the original effects for Star Wars, which was very exciting. And you see all these old schoolers walking around in the studios, and well, it was very exciting. I mean, really exciting, I must say.
And it ended up being an awesome TV show. I just loved Clone Wars, and I was so happy that Disney Plus finally finished. Because it was years without knowing what the ending would be, right? And now they completed the season, and I think it was amazing. I just love it.
Oh, great! Yes.
I'm curious though. Obviously, you met a lot of animators, a lot of professionals, because you're part of their knowledge base, teaching, mentoring, and all that. But also, we were just talking to Dino, and Dino was talking about it. In a way, for me, from an outsider perspective, feels like there are a lot of animators out there in the market. There's a lot of TV shows, cartoons, and a lot going on. But at the same time, when I talk to you guys, it sounds like everybody, and like Dino mentioned, it's a small world. So is it really a small world? Do you actually know most of the people? How does it feel? It's because it seems like you're always crossing paths. You know each other. You work together on so many projects. What is like to be an animator? And obviously, it sounds like a very inclusive industry.
Yes.
Anyway, I want to hear from you. What does it feel like to?
Actually, this to me is the exciting part of the industry, I must say. And this is what actually glued me to the industry, to be very frank. I love that it was, like you said, a small family. You had key players, especially in the 2D times. It was even more so in the traditional animation times. You had these key players that basically drove the industry forward. But even now, it's everybody's connected. And the truth is, you never really apply for a job for animation. I want to work on this project. I apply. Usually, it's friends that pull you in and say, hey, look, I'm on this project. You want to come in, hop on, and I can recommend you. And the studios love that too. They get people that they have worked with together before. And since it's such a collaborative effort, it's such a teamwork, you want to always have the people on your side that you enjoy working with. And I mean, look at our story. Dino and I, we met so many years ago, but we always came back together to work together because there was a great chemistry and good collaboration. Yeah, another thing is in animation particularly, you spend 80% of your day together with your mates, right, at work. Yeah. You better get along, right, as well.
Yeah. And I think, many of us are sort of, cut from the same cloth, because the thing that motivates us is the desire for excellence, and to keep improving on what we do in all areas, learning new software and then applying that to the knowledge that we have in animation, character development, as I say, storytelling. Just why, for me, it's always been the most exciting part of production is the pre-production, is the concept stage, creating that script, that strong story, and then designing characters that will fit within that story, art direction that will, embellish those characters, And as Ollie would say, often we are asked to kind of help, almost as doctors of animation, you know, where there's a problem maybe with the script and it needs some script doctoring, or it needs an experienced eye to look over that script, understand where maybe the problems are, and prevent those fires before they happen.
But one thing that I found interesting as well from just now hearing about the industry, obviously, besides having all these technical skills that are a must for the job, it's interesting as well because it sounds like, you know, there's a lot of collaboration, so you really need to be good at teamwork, or that will help you a lot. But also, in a way, you know, being friendly or able to socialize or really communicate with people, because again, it's interesting how the industry works in terms of, you know, people recommending you or calling you for a job and this sort of stuff, which in turn you don't really need to apply for jobs, but you know, you just need to keep going, and things will sort of naturally come to you or roll out in your career. Now, talking about studying, Ollie, you made a interesting comment about, and I think, you know, it's very common, about people need to be able to draw, right? And interestingly enough, you mentioned that some of the students do not think that they had to be able to draw to be in the business. So my question for you is, and for those watching that are planning to get into the business but perhaps cannot draw, what are the skills that you should be working on if you can draw? And also, what are sort of the jobs that you could be doing if you want to get into animation, but you're not really considering drawing?
Oh, I guess, I mean, if you talk about animation itself, nowadays, CG animation, you can absolutely do a good job without drawing, because the approach became different now. It's very much about character performance, about acting in the first place, no matter if it's 2D, CG, anything really. This is the drive of animation, character animation, right? So nowadays, what animators do, they reference themselves, they do reference videos of themselves, filming themselves, and use that as a guide, sometimes even almost one-to-one on the animation. So I think that would be very important, to learn to be expressive, to learn acting, and to perform in front of the camera as well as in front of an audience, even good, right?
I think the reason why we mentioned drawing, and I know that Richard Williams, for example, who was, you know, a great animator in his own right, as well as someone who inspired the industry, certainly in the UK, he's a Canadian-born animator. He would often say, you know, if you can't draw, forget it. But that, particularly with the traditional hand-drawn animation. Mm-hmm. But even with CG, if you can do thumbnails, even if it's like a Hitchcock, you know, stick figures approach to thumbnailing, doing basic little key drawings. So you've got a guide. It's often is the case, the better you can draw, the better you can convey what it is that you want to convey in your animation. That is if you want to specifically be a character animator.
Yeah, but in CG animation now, there's so many opportunities for people that can draw, like in rigging, for example, all the technical jobs, effects, hair.
Yeah, there's so many aspects to animation. So somebody may think, I want to get into animation, but it's not necessarily on the creative drawing side. They may want to get into production coordination, you know, or producing, or you know, even, you know, budgeting and accounting, or you know, managing departments, etc. So there are so many, especially with CG now, as Ollie said, there's so many parts to the whole that whereas in traditional hand-drawn animation, you'd get one animator who would rough out the animation and do the breakdowns, and then an assistant or an in-betweener that would follow up and clean up those drawings or do in-betweens. Now you get so many different departments handling just those two areas, right? You know.
But I must say, nowadays it's also so impressive, the young artists that come out of school and using all the digital equipment, digital painting or drawing. This is really impressive. I mean, they have access to so many tools.
Yeah.
And nowadays is actually, you can learn more or less everything from your home. You can go on YouTube, you can participate in drawing classes, and it shows people are so strong and good, the young talent. which of course the studios are very happy about.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think I've been hearing that for a number of years now, and obviously, and we've seen it. New young talent that's coming on the scene. There's so many animation film schools now that are out there that are nurturing this talent, and then there's talent that train off their own backs, in their own bedrooms, and learning from YouTube sort of.
Yeah, it's very inspiring actually to see. I still look at tutorials from young artists. They say how they draw, and I learn from it, and I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
I love how they manage to use all the technology for their advantage.
To summarize for everybody watching us, if you want to get in animation and you can draw, don't panic. There's hope for you. There are jobs.
Absolutely.
Oli, can you tell us about your experience with Cartoon Network in Abu Dhabi?
Well, that was a very interesting project. Basically, the Abu Dhabi government wanted to establish or wanted to ramp up their media industry. And as part of that, they wanted to, particularly also in animation, they wanted to expand. And now there was a problem that they could attract studios, but studios were like, yeah, but do you have talent? Do you have talent on site that we can actually produce these films? And this is where the idea got born to set up an academy together with a Cartoon Network as a collaborative project. And so my job was, again, to find local talents in the region who has a talent to work in animation and the passion and the dedication. And I developed actually, first it was a 12 months, later was a 16 months training program, full-time program on becoming an animation artist, taking everything into account from script to screen, going through the entire process, but also touching on 2D as well as on CG animation. To build basically the concept, the ideas all in 2D, then bring it into the 3D world and even into CG character animation. So that was very exciting. I loved this so much because basically they let me really run this entire program. And again, I could basically tailor make a program for young artists to become full-fledged animation artists, not just in the discipline of animation, but in all disciplines. And this is where my experience with Lucasfilm came in, of course, and my own work experience. So I think we've been very successful in bringing in a very strong curriculum. And I could bring in people like Dino and other friends that I worked with before to share their experience with the students. And it's been nothing but an amazing experience, I must say. And it's always so amazing when, no matter where in the world you go, there's so much passion and dedication for animation and interest.
And talent.
And talent, yes. Yeah. So it's really amazing. So we actually went through universities, we did outreach, we looked at the talents and we looked at portfolios. And I was actually quite blown away how good the talent is in the region. But they never had really like an opportunity to make this a job. It's still, especially because it's a very fast growing culture. The gap between the generations is very big. So for parents to understand, for their kids to pursue a career as an animator is very abstract. So they don't quite understand that. But they see how dedicated and passionate the kids are, and let them hopefully do it. And we brought all together, we had like 4 intakes for 4 years. I was running the program there. And the class size was between 10 and 12. And we had from all sort of background, from the whole Middle East region, but also we had a few individuals from Germany, from Australia, from England joining the course. And they've been all very excited and passionate. And again, it was really this little family feeling. We built a strong community. And I love that so much about the job, and to be able to enable others to create their films and see how it comes alive and give them the skill set and the tools. And many of them then ended up working in the Cartoon Network studio on site, where they did a
series,
a CG animated series based on local content. And
Mansour, right?
Yeah, Mansour.
Yeah, I was checking it out.
Yes, and I'm very proud of
this.
It's
very successful.
Yeah, because it's a great success story on its own, and that we've been able to actually bring people basically from a junior level into producing their own show in the country. That was really rewarding, and it was a great experience, I must say.
In fact, it's a shame that the thing didn't really kind of blossom and continue on, because what you had there, when I visited, what really struck me as quite unique was you had which was actually almost like a studio setup. The way that Ollie was training the crew and teaching them, it was very much like hands-on studio setup, which then fed the real studio at Cartoon Network in order to produce Mansoor. And because of a couple of times I was there, I initially was asked to direct the series Mansoor, but I couldn't because I was busy on another project. So I recommended a very good friend, a mutual friend of ours, Simon Ward Horner, who did a really great job directing that show. Along with Adam was producing and coordinating, but had it not been for Ollie to set up the initial training program, which then became the crew for Mansoor in many ways. So that, I think that was the interesting thing, is whenever you're training a newbie or someone who's going to break into the animation industry, I think the fact that you've got your feet both in the freelance circuit as well as training, and for Ollie, even though he was pretty much full-time at Cartoon Network over there, he'd had quite a bit of experience already in the animation industry, which made him a perfect tutor and a trainer for this new talent.
That was an amazing experience. And I'm still in touch with most of them. We are good friends. We collaborate on projects, and we help each other. Again, the same thing. Sometimes when there's help needed with some training or additional service work, that's where we jump in, as well as I connect students or ex-students very often with projects.
So talking about talent, I know, Ollie, you also work as a coach and mentor for other animators, right? Who can look for you, and how does that work, or what type of help can you provide people with?
Well, anybody can look for me, really, from the starting artist who wants some advice, as to people who want to ramp up, want to work on the portfolio, as well as I do, for example, a lot of mentorship programs in schools in Asia in particular. I work with schools in Shanghai and in Asia, Singapore, where I jump on board, sometimes on site, to give workshop or master classes, as well as mentor students through their assignment programs in school, which is where the school engaged me to do that. But also, if somebody wants to do the film and needs some advice there, I can always help them mentoring through. And nowadays with the internet, is so easy to do this anywhere in the world, really, which is very exciting. So I do have individuals and students all over the globe, really, mostly in Asia due to my long working period there. I worked more than 13 years in Asia, lived and worked there. And also it's the most hungry country, and most the areas where they expand most in
growing,
animation.
fast.
It's growing fast, and there's a big demand for ramping up, becoming better and stronger on an individual basis, but also then as an entire company. And this is where then again, if a company approaches me and asks, we need some help here with how can we shift from, for example, on-site working into remote working, and how can we find the right talents and so on. This is then where I collaborate again with Dino, where we combine our networks as well as experience and help those companies to ramp up their projects and streamline their production processes and so on. So it goes really from the small individual all the way to big studios and governments on top of it. Some governments approach me sometimes where they say, we want to really have a better placing in the media/animation industry. Like, for example, with Abu Dhabi, it happened. And this is very often also some service work we do, working with governments, yes.
Yeah, it is very much a modular approach, and it's one of the things that Ollie and I are collaborating on at the moment, which is providing our services in a bigger way for studio setups in and around Asia, as well as wherever companies may be having issues with any number of areas within the production pipeline or story. We as almost animation doctors, if you like, will oversee and give an analysis, and then possibly, if it's needed, offer a solution, i.e. our services to kind of help in any way we can. So, and that's basically just utilizing our experience combined.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes even small studios would approach me and say, I have an idea. I always want to do an animated film, an animated series, and I have this idea, a script and so on. Can you have a look at it? And where do you think this should be going? This I do too, for example. And I did this a couple of times last year, where I then help connecting the dots. And again, this is when it grows on a bigger level. This is where it comes in the collaboration with Dino then.
Yeah. So just before I continue, I want to ask everyone to please make sure to subscribe to our channel and to drop a comment if you have any questions or want to make any suggestions.
And click the like button if you like this video.
Hit the like button. There you go. If you don't like, you can still hit the button as well. Ollie, we briefly touched on Ollie Johnston, and that, I think that's a very interesting story. I want to ask you more about it. Can you tell us more about what your relationship with Ollie was like?
Oh, it was amazing. It still fuels my enthusiasm and passion these days. So when I reached out to Ollie and say, it was funny because as a kid I saw the name Oliver Johnston in the credits of the films, of the Disney movies, and at that time I didn't know much about the Nine Old Men and the history and story of the studios, but I thought, wow, there's another Oliver that is working in these films, and I thought that was so cool. And I actually wrote a letter to Oliver Johnston at the Disney studios in USA, and I just wrote a fan letter, really. And I never expected anything, but Ollie actually took the time to reply the fan letter and put a drawing of Thumper inside, which is his contribution in the film Bambi. He was in charge of the Thumper character. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. This guy is great. He's actually replying. And I think, to be honest, timing was on my side, because it was the time when the original animators retired and they were actually looking for new talent to join the pool of animators, and where they wanted to basically pass on the traditions and the animation, the passion and dedication for animation. So I was there at the right time, and because there was no internet, I don't think they got letters all the time, or emails, so to speak. So yeah, and from that I was like, okay, great, this door's open. So I kept writing letters and asking questions and telling him, oh, I want to be an animator like you. What do I have to do? And so he basically took me a bit under his wings and gave me good advice what I should be doing. Look around people, observe people, look at the things around you, write, make notes, make little sketches, make little drawings. These will all help you with ideas later for character animation. And like I told you, he would advise me to learn anatomy, life drawing, go to the zoo, sketch animals. And I went every weekend. I went to the zoo to sketch animals. And actually, I ended up liking that so much that it became really a pleasure for me to go to the zoo to observe animals, because they don't behave differently when you look at them. They're just very natural. And it's very exciting and relaxing to sit there and draw. And it's funny because in the beginning, you feel very shy as an artist. You stand there and draw the animals, and people flock around you like, oh, what is he drawing? And asking questions, and you're like feeling almost a little bit embarrassed. But it's part of the journey, and it kind of helps you to really get a stronger understanding, passion for the subject matter. So, and actually, as a matter of fact, it were the animal drawings that brought me into the Disney studios at the end, because they really loved my animal sketches, and they used it even in their sample portfolios for Disney, for application. So I was very proud of that, to be honest, because Ollie gave me basically the direction, and I followed that direction, and it paid off.
I saw that you also took your students to the zoo.
Yeah, exactly.
For drawing, which is very interesting.
I wanted my students to always feel the same experience I did. I wanted to benefit from the same things. And even if you don't end up in animation or anything, I think drawing from life it's such a great thing to do. It helps you on so many levels, and become observant and live in the moment, and understanding life differently and appreciating things differently. I think it's great. And so, and beyond that, Ollie then also asked me questions about, so how are things in Germany? It was at the time when the wall came down. It was East Germany, and asked me, can you tell me about your experience? How is it going? So it became really an exchange of information, which was great. And I always was happy when I could something do in return for Ollie by showing my drawings and seeing that I'm improving. He would be happy, and I would be more happy, of course. But so I wanted to make him proud. I wanted to make it worth his time to invest into me and to believe in me, which was great. I got to visit him at his house, and he invited me over, and then he would show me all the original drawings of Pinocchio, and it was breathtaking.
I honestly think you were blessed. I think you're right. It was about timing, but also this is it was like a pure innocence and joy and passion that Ollie had for film and animation. See, I never knew that much about animation when I was young, but I think Ollie you were all of 16, 17 when you first made the contact with Ollie Johnson. And so from 17, you actually went over and did the internship at what age?
I was 19.
19. So there's already a few years there of that growth and building up. This, believe me, I know from my own experience that once that passion is ignited, once that spark is there, like Robbie, your passion and desire for Star Wars and your love for Star Wars, can you imagine if suddenly you get an opportunity to work on a Star Wars film? That's kind of what it's like.
Amazing, yeah.
For us, when I first broke into animation, I worked as an apprentice at the first studio. As I mentioned before, the book that was in the studio that was just being bought by the owner was The Illusion of Life. And Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson, wrote that book, and all the material in that book is pure gold.
It's amazing.
And so for me, my birth into the animation industry was through that book and studying that book from cover to cover. But for Ollie actually kind of was able to dip his toes, so to speak, in the pool of talent that was there at the studio by kind of tapping into his friendship with Ollie Johnson, and then with Andreas Deja, who's a great guy too, a wonderful, incredible talent. And then, to rub shoulders with Glenn Keane, another wonderful talent at the Disney Studios in Paris. So, you were very lucky. I think.
I was very lucky, yes. And Ollie Johnson even himself sent me over his book, The Illusion of Life, with his dedication in there. And basically, I remember it says kind of stay with it, right? So that really fueled me for so many years. Stay with it. And it's kind of whenever I feel discouraged or felt like, oh man, this is not for me, I remember his words, like stay with it. And that really made me go really far.
I want to mention a few things about Ollie Johnson, just to paint the picture for those who don't know him. So he was a legend in animation. You must know that by now from what we've been talking here. But he literally won the Disney Legend Award, and his work also earned the National Medal of Arts. Among his works are Pinocchio, Bambi, Peter Pan, Cinderella, and many other Disney classics. So I hope that paints the picture enough. And what a honor, Ollie, that you actually met him and you had a really nice personal connection with him. It's an awesome story, and I can see that it marked for life, and it's
Yes.
always a nice story to share with anyone. It was just awesome to listen to you talking about it. Just as we wrap it up here, do you have any other tips for those watching who want to get into the industry of animation?
I think, first of all, of course, it's very important to be driven by passion. And I think that should never end, because it just fuels you for life. And I think it's also important to manage expectation in a sense. What I tell my students is, most probably until you're in your early 30s, this is the most creative path of your
Growth,
career,
yeah.
and growth. Even though it feels like you're only learning in those years, but those are the most creative years. And there will come a time where, because working for studios and working for others, you realize it's also, at the end of the day, you deliver a product, you deliver a service, right? So you cannot always exactly want it to do it the way you want. You need to follow what the client has in mind and what all your company expect of you. So it's very important to become a professional in that sense. Very often I see with students, when they break into the industry, they take it too personal, but they should be honored to have me, I have all this talent, but they forget that they get hired for a task, for a service, for a job, and get paid for that. And I think it's very important to develop that professional attitude together with the passion, and be aware that you might not always find that passion and this satisfaction within the projects you're working in. So it's always good on the side to keep your own personal projects that you're passionate about and keep developing those, so you don't lose that passion. But it's also important, I think, once you hit your 30s, priorities and interests change a little bit just by nature. You might think of having family, or you want to settle somewhere, or you want to also do reach things in your personal life. So it's important to think of, so what's beyond my 30s when I reach that point, and think of maybe going more into a supervisory role or a managerial role. Some people stay great artists their entire life and really, really good at it, but others, they might not be that lucky and might have to reinvent themselves all the time and adapt to the environment. So that's why I always say, have a bit of a second base that you can work with. Have two skills you develop. For example, if you want to be a storyboard artist, make sure you look into other things like either production management, that could be very different, or into animating, something that kind of gives you a second leg, so to speak, to stand on according to what's happening in your life. And sometimes even maybe you want to break out a little bit of working in production, because the truth is, let's say you work in visual effects or in big animation studios, you always do one task for many, 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 many years. And eventually you might get a little bit tired or bored with it. So it's important to you yourself that you keep learning other things and look into other areas, and always listen to your heart, what your heart wants and where you want to be.
Thank you. All right, everyone. If you want to reach out or learn more about the works of Mr. Oliver Acker or Mr. Dino Atanasio, please check the links in the description below. Thank you so much, Oli and Dino, for joining us today. Take care. Hope to see you soon in the channel.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. Ciao for now.
Cheers.
Welcome to Stardust.